takes as little as one single exercise to change your mobility in unparalleled ways. And today I don't just have one of these exercises for your hips, but two. In fact, these two exercises have so many benefits outside of hip mobility that it would be hard to put them all into one single video, but here I am trying. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Tilt our hips until our back is fully extended. Keep our leg extended. And then we're just simply gonna hinge forward as far as we can. Very importantly, without rounding our back. Because the closer you get your upper body towards your leg and the floor, the more your lower back is going to start compensating for a lack of flexibility in your backside by rounding, so you can get deeper into that position. And we will actively try to avoid that by staying as extended as possible to maximize the flexibility that we can get for our posterior chain. And then we will reverse the same movement by flexing our posterior chain, which basically means that we're switching between a lengthened, stretched position in our posterior chain into a flexed position in our posterior chain. Now, this way of hinging in our hips is already amazing for hip mobility as well as posterior chain flexibility. And you will have noticed we have a lot of balance inclusion for all our stabilizer muscles throughout our entire body, so we do not lose stability as we progress through the movement pattern. But that's just level number one, so let's check out the full progression. Once you feel comfortable and stable in going through this movement, just like so. Now we can start adding internal as well as external hip rotation by simply hinging forward like so, keeping our back leg as extended as we can. And all we need to do is turn inward with our hips, shifting the stretch from one side to an external rotation, releasing the stretch and repeating once more, actively turning inwards and actively turning outwards, having even more balance requirements and a lot of strength requirements from our tiny foot musculature to keep us balanced throughout the entire movement. Reversing, you can shake it out a little bit and then switch to the other leg, hinging forward, internal rotation, external rotation, as long a movement as you can muster without losing balance, and repeating once or twice throughout one repetition before we reverse again. With the goal of our next level in the progression being able to keep our back fully extended, moving down into a complete hinge until we can place our fingertips on the floor, and without doing so, turn inwards, turn outwards all the way, turn inwards again, outwards all the way, and then get up, counting this as one full repetition. And now this is where things start getting really interesting, because from here on out, we'll start increasing our range of motion by working on an elevation, just like so, both with our internal rotations and external rotations. And then what we're also gonna do throughout this entire movement is add some resistance. And this is gonna take this to a whole other level, because there are two things we're gonna do with this. We will actively switch between having the weight only on the left side, just like so, going through our rotations throughout the one movement. And then we're gonna switch to the other hand, staying on the same leg, which is going to massively shift the type of balance we're gonna require, and the type of core strength and stabilizer strength we're going to need from the rest of our body. Once again, all the way down, inwards, outwards, back parallel, and all the way up, focusing on flexing our posterior chain all the way. An insane amount of core inclusion throughout stabilization, as well as stabilization in all the muscles in our legs, and the type of strength we're going to require to reverse this movement again, as well as the flexibility we can get in our entire posterior chain, is absolutely amazing. So once you have progressed to this level, you're putting together so many benefits throughout one single exercise that, just like said before, will practically change your entire mobility all through this single pattern. With our next exercise being famously one of the most goated hip mobility exercises, the pigeon pose. And the progression I'm going to show you today is one that you've probably never seen before, because we're going to take this exercise to some insane heights. But first things first, our level 1 goal is being able to get into this pigeon pose, and the easiest way to do so, if you are lacking the necessary flexibility throughout your glutes and your quads, as well as your adductors and the insides of your hips, to move your leg down like so and press your hips down, starting by working on an elevation, placing your foot right in front of your knee, and then with your hands as support, moving into an external rotation in your hip very carefully, just like so, until you can place your shin all the way down. And then from here, all you need to do is start moving your knee down and elevating your leg higher and higher. Work your way to this position, and once you're here, just tiny steps, knee down, all the way, opening up your hips, opening up your glutes until you feel comfortable enough to grab yourself a mat and get into the same position on the floor. Placing your foot right in front of your knee, just like so, using your hands for some assistance, and then once you're here, you're going to actively flex your butt and your lower back, pushing your hips down, lengthening your hip flexor, and now we have the single benefit that we didn't get from our last exercise, which is a hip flexor stretch. We were flexing in our hips the whole time without truly extending them into a stretch. Now we're getting that done too. So between those two exercises, you're almost taking care of 95% of your required hip mobility exercise. Level number 2, once we are comfortable in this position, very easy, just get down on your elbows, just like so, and relax into this amazing stretch throughout your hips and your glutes and everything surrounding your hip joints. And of course, we have massive amounts of knee mobility as well as ankle mobility, especially when it comes to dorsiflexion or extension. And third level, just as simply, we're going to start extending our upper body and actively pushing our chest and upper body down until we are fully flat on the floor, keeping in this external rotation in our hip, holding for 20 to 30 seconds, and then releasing some of the pressure and some of the stretch before we repeat once more. Because now we have all the tools we need to get the maximum amount of benefits from this exercise, because now we're going to work on it dynamically, meaning we're going to stay in movement throughout the exercise. We now want to actively flex our posterior chain, lengthening our hip flexor as well as our quads even more for even more stretch. And then we will start folding forward, bringing our upper body down, even touching our face slightly to the floor before we reverse into this extended position, folding forward, maximizing the stretch surrounding our hip joint, opening up our glutes as much as possible, and reversing once more, now requiring a lot of strength from our posterior chain and working on an insane amount of mobility throughout our entire hips. Now, I would highly advise you to work your way up to this level slowly and carefully and get really comfortable, because the jumps in difficulty from here on out are going to be very far apart, because our next level will already start with our leg at hip joint height or slightly above it, which means that we already have a lot of flexibility surrounding our hip joint. First thing first, lean forward and bring our upper body into complete contact with our leg like so, pulling us as closely as possible before we move all the way up, once again arching in our back. And then, very important, we're going to actively elevate our knee just like so, and then of course reversing by bringing our knee down once more, and then folding forward all the way, complete contact with our leg before we repeat this whole process once more. Flexing our entire posterior chain and then moving down, spinal flexion, and completely flexing our anterior chain, which means our core is tight, pulling our upper body closer towards our leg. With our next level, we're going to switch from ankle extension, which we used in the last exercise, like so, into ankle flexion, just like so. Because from here on out, we're going to fully extend our leg and add some internal rotation as well. We're going to actively elevate. We're going to flex our adductors, pull our leg up and extend it all the way, flexing our quads as much as we can, actively pointing our toes. And then, very carefully, we need to reverse the same exact movement, pushing forward and then carefully, in a controlled fashion, back into external rotation, leg down all the way, knee down all the way until it is at the very least at hip height. Going through this motion like so will help us work a lot on combining this external rotation with internal rotation with a lot of strength, so we can once again combine strength with flexibility for full joint mobility. And this moves us to our final level. We have two elevations, one for our hind leg, where we're gonna place our foot in extension, just like so, And now for the front elevation, we're going to move back into the same position we had before. And now instead of having our foot at hip height, we can move down lower and lower and lower. In fact, as low as we can, pushing our hips down and bring our leg as high up towards our chest as possible, as well as leaning forward all the way, just like so. And once again, we're going to do this dynamically by moving up, complete spinal extension, flexing every single muscle in our posterior chain, and then moving back down, complete spinal flexion, rounding our back as much as we can and pushing our hips down all the way. Once again, pushing our hips forward, flexing our entire posterior chain, leaning backwards in our upper body, even opening up our stomach, our chest, and our shoulders. And once again, complete spinal flexion, pushing our hips down actively and rolling forward as much as we can to open up our hips all the way up, flexing the backside, all the way down, flexing our core, pulling down and actively pushing down towards the floor. We've taken 2 exercises that can be very beginner friendly and went through a progression that can take them to a level that probably 99% of people will never ever achieve. And you can take your time working your way up through every single level of both of these exercises and stop wherever you feel comfortable. And with just these 2, you can basically change your entire lower body mobility to a hard to believe degree if you haven't gone through it all by yourself. That said, sadly, that's all the time I've left for you today. So if you like the video, and come on, subscribe. We do stuff like that very regularly, which means that I'll see you very soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo. Peace out.